I am no longer an anime fan. I haven't been for a long time, but anime follows me wherever I go. My name is Tensai, which I got from the manga Slam Dunk. My profile picture looks like this because I draw like this. The first video on this channel is a clip from Urusei Yatsura. The old version. This was before the new one came out and Gen Z was made aware of the show's existence. I am no longer an anime fan, but my favorite film is an anime film. I watched it for the first time when I was 13, and an anime fan. And it just never stopped being the greatest film I've ever seen. Garugamesh! My entire core friend group and social circle is made up of weebs and gamers. Gaming! But I'm no longer a weeb. And I've never been a gamer. Don't ask me why I had my big Sonic phase. I wasn't an anime fan then, either. This isn't a clout thing, you must believe me. Being an anime fan was a lot less cool when I was an anime fan than it is now that I'm not an anime fan.
Some of you sexy ball, muscle head niggas, you did not like anime, bruh. You would have heard me talking back in school, and you would have slapped the dog shit out of me. And y'all see that Megan Thee Stallion walk around with that wagon.
It would be more convenient for me now if I was an anime fan, but I'm not an anime fan.
Leave me alone!
I haven't seen an episode of One Piece in at least 6 years, and I haven't read a chapter in 3. I think I would appreciate One Piece a lot more now than I did when I was younger, actually. But I don't know. It's not as easy as it used to be to read a chapter of manga in the early morning or late at night. It just doesn't feel natural anymore. Does that make sense? This year, actually, around this time, depending on when this is released, marks the 10-year anniversary of when I was first introduced to Naruto. And by proxy, when I was first introduced to anime. I downplay it now, but it would not be too far of an exaggeration to say it literally changed my life.
You put this obsession before anything else. You put it before sleep, you put it before eating, you put it before...
The visual effects are amazing.
It's totally different.
Lots of tentacles.
It makes anything that's come out from any other company look like one of these late-night Czechoslovakian kind of cartoons.
Anime's intrusion into the Western psyche came at the tail end of its golden age in Japan. You had these strange cartoons like Astro Boy and Speed Racer with their strange voice acting and animation styles, but this isn't really something that a child audience recognizes immediately as foreign. When I was 8, I knew Sonic X was Japanese. When Disney XD showed Doraemon for a time, I was apparently the only person on planet Earth who liked it. I think I knew it was strange as well. I knew those were cartoons, but this distinction wasn't something that immediately registered. An audience that grew up with Michael Mouse, Bugs the Bunny, and Freddie Flintstone could not have comprehended Akira though. This was not Astro Boy. Yet it was. In many essential ways it was, but it wasn't. This hyper-stylized piece of dystopian science fiction captured the collective horror and dread of a nation and people damaged by war, having its country recreated from the ground up through capitalist consumerism and American influence. All explored through its angsty young people in gory, spectacular, and horrific detail. All through cartoons. We didn't know what this was. We needed a name for whatever this was.
I got into anime because I was a really weird kid in like elementary and middle school, and I was looking for weird things to be into as like a place to feel more welcome and like find like my people or whatever. And you know, I was introduced to it technically by Pokemon, but that doesn't really count, I feel like, because that was so like it was like advertised as just like another show and was so Americanized when it was brought over to us. The real deal for me was like Naruto, which I think was for most people. I don't even remember how I got into it. I just started watching it and I was like tweaking out over how good it was.
Naruto electrified my 12-year-old mind like nothing I had ever experienced in my entire life. My parents could not know what this was because there were demons. I decided to watch the show after a friend told me, "You gotta watch Naruto, it's so cool, you gotta watch it." A bunch of them were into Naruto and had gone through the recent anime boom of 2015. It was my first year of high school. Yes, we did high school at 12. I had avoided Naruto because it looked like all those shows I wasn't allowed to watch. But I went home and watched it anyway on YouTube. I watched about 9 episodes in a row that night. This was early or mid-November. That Christmas, which lasted from the last week of December to the first week of January, I watched, to be very conservative, about 200 episodes. I remember I was at the first Naruto vs Sasuke fight at the start of the break, and I was at the Pain fight in Shippuden when we came back. I watched all the fillers, and I loved them.
Look at me! I'm a bugger!
I watched the Rock Lee spin-off thing, and it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen in my life. I didn't care what it was. I just needed more of whatever this was.
This would be back in 2016 when I was 12. I was really into video games at the time, and I was searching fan art for my favorite characters on Google and shit. And I kept coming across this specific art style of really cutely drawn humans. I really liked that art style. I did some digging. Turns out it was called anime, but because I was a kid, I called it anime. So I searched up how to draw anime, and because I was a really huge art kid, I latched onto that style. I either only drew realism or anime.
The Japanimation boom of the 90s and early 2000s was like this underground little virus that was happening in the West.
My first impression was the artwork was so wonderful. Mr. Otomo's story seemed to fit what I thought were the tastes of the American audience.
Akira was a dam that broke, but there arose a little what can only be called a cult of people who were drawn to this that we began to call Japanimation. There was more stuff going on there. We found Gundam, Ranma Half, Ninja Scroll, Galaxy Express, and would begin distributing it through bootleg VHS tapes, Laserdisc, and fan subs.
My lord, if you believe Goku, you are safe.
Popo, get Goku and everyone.
Soon we'd get localizations like the pitiful recut of Nausicaa that made Miyazaki swear off his stuff ever getting edited by foreign distributors again.
Warring nations close in from the south, and those from the dead world come haunting from the north.
Somehow my neighbor figured that out. Like, she found out that I drew anime, so she approached me and she informed me that, hey, this isn't called anime, first of all, it's called anime. And she introduced me to anime as a whole, that it came from Japan and it was really good, that I should definitely watch something. A horror anime. Another. Yeah, that was my first anime at age 12. Another. I watched Death Note immediately after, and I was a stupid kid, but the animation and the way they moved and the colors, it all seemed so mature and so impressive, like so something out of the ordinary.
4 cowboys, 4 bounty hunters, 4 hearts, 4 notes.
Come the late 90s, we'd get blocks like Toonami, where the second wave of not Japanimation but anime would come to the fore. Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, Bebop, Pokemon.
Now, a lot of things come over from the Orient.
I said, son, what is that one morning? He said, that's Pokemon.
Would petrify the religious right with its evil demonic pocket monster magic.
I can't think of anything that come over from the Orient that actually had a big impact or a phenomenon type craze other than Godzilla.
Some grow and evolve into even more powerful creatures. The children are developing relationships with all these Pokemon creatures.
And then in your mind, you actually fight battles. You go through mazes, you go through dungeons, and you actually fight wars with evil wizards, dragons, demons.
Control of spirits in the dark realm.
Powerful satanic beings.
And they tell those spirits what to do.
It's all in the mind.
The child at some point becomes capable of taking these powers and channeling them through their mind, through their arms, or through their power sources.
And I mean, if you've got a vivid imagination, you can have one heck of a game.
People choose to see them. They are videos, people buy them, you know, so what's the problem?
We do in this country have a fairly reliable system of film censorship. Given that that happens, I feel it's unreasonable of the newspapers to blame filmmakers and film distributors when material falls into inappropriate hands.
日本を理解したいと、漫画を通じて日本を理解したい方だったら、暴力とセックスに満ちた漫画だけでなく、優れた漫画を見てもらいたい。日本を理解するためにはね。
Fans took to online forums, arranged for conventions to meet each other, but this was all still a strange, obscure nerd thing.
And it you know, I don't know.
Did you know that 4chan was created because of Azumanga Daioh?
Oh my god! 何言ってんすか。だからさっき言ったようにアニメはかすめたくらいだから。なんすか、まったく僕だって普通の人間ですから、まあコスプレくらいしたっていいじゃないですか。もう昔のことだからいいでしょ別に。なんだ
？You'll see a lot more of me during cosplay tonight, trust me.
People see someone in a costume and it raises questions as to, well, that costume's really neat, but where did it come from? And the questions lead to answers, leads to exposure, leads to an expansion of the entire genre and building of the fan base.
しかし一度でもコスプレをしたことがあるオタクの諸君は繰り返し何度でもコスプレをする傾向にあることがこの表でよくわかる。コスプレの言いようのない魅力にオタクは取りつかれてしまうのである。
Spirited Away would completely electrify the imagination of a generation of kids and young people. This was not the Flintstones. This was not Bambi. This was something else.
My initial experience with anime was actually with my first partner when I was in middle school watching My Hero Academia because they really liked it. It's cool. It's okay. I liked it more back then for sure. I also had a few brief stints with stuff like Cowboy Bebop or Seven Deadly Sins. And the latter was interesting. Though the anime that really made me love the medium was Sailor Moon. This is like my favorite thing ever, mainly for its characters. The show's structuring led itself to have a lot of downtime in between the bigger plot threads to fuck around with the main cast. I know most people absolutely despise filler arcs, but for a show like this, it really benefited from them. I absolutely related to the main protagonist Usagi Tsukino and her friend Sailor Jupiter, or Makoto Kino the most. Their journeys of growing up and discovering their femininity hit my heartstrings as a baby trans. Those stories about personal identity resonated with me the most, even as an early adult. Shows like Evangelion, Fooly Cooly, and Welcome to the NHK have genuinely put some perspective on myself, not only about my transness, but my life in general. They're sort of like my OMG, this is so me works, like how 70s Americana films about male manipulators are for white dudes who use Twitter and rate your music too much. I feel like anime has so much more to say sometimes. Not like other parts of the medium of animation don't, but you won't see the abstractness, provocativeness, and unconventionality from many other places than anime.
Naruto might have been the first show I watched where the character was exactly my age, and through him I was able to access a version of self that no other thing at that point allowed me. I got into One Piece, and all of those people would fight the government to access the freedom that status quo would not allow. From another recommendation, I got into Fairy Tail. Stick a pin in Fairy Tail. But it was all this magic, sparkling thing from this strange place that seemed to speak to me in a way that nothing else ever did before. And I had to see everything. I had to see everything. I had to see everything.
機械を設計した人たちっていうのはこうどんなその時が善であると思ってやってもやっぱり時代の風間の中で機械文明そのもののこう手先になるからアニメーションもそうです。
呪われた夢。
呪われてる。今の人類の夢っていうのはみんな呪われてますよ、どっかで。美しく呪われた夢ってことが多いんですよ。
At that time, it was just me and about 4 people in my class, and you know, we were the...
よー、兄ちゃんたち。こんなとこ並んで何やってんのよ。
映画見るんですよ。アニメ映画。
Schmucks. We were the losers. We were, as you'd call yourself then, the otaku.
Otaku means obsessive nerd. It is not a positive word, no matter what you've heard.
So I've talked to some Japanese people, and they say that, and I say that I'm an otaku, and they go, "Why?"
The Japanese media uses the word in a negative way.
なぜならほとんどオタクのものだからです。オタクは何も学ばないのをオタクって言うんですからね。
But I learned to wear that badge with pride.
監督はオタクじゃないです。
僕はオタクじゃないです。
結構上昇感ですね。 I go by the DJ name Johnny Otaku. Hardest working anime fan in the Tennessee Valley, and damn proud of it.
My memories of the time of otakudom are tied to the particular experience being in high school, Afro-Caribbean, in the mid to late 2010s. I remember Anime Abridged. I still quote this One Piece parody to this day.
Johnny Depp is not that bad! Zorro! Antonio Banderas!
I remember old the anime man, Giguk. I saw that one video about Mr. Anime at 12 AM one day. The first YouTuber to kill their entire family and attempt to do the old American pastime of shooting a school was one of the first anime YouTubers. Didn't do much for the bad rep anime still had in the mainstream.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I remember weeaboos.
Konnichiwa, you magnificent bastards! I got a joke for you. Weeaboos go to Japan and be like, where are the subtitles?
For better or worse, oh god, definitely for worse. Perhaps one of the most culturally significant videos on YouTube. I will not explain.
For those of you who don't know what a weeaboo is, a non-Japanese person who basically denounces their own culture and calls themselves Japanese. They try to learn Japanese through the anime they watch and usually end up pronouncing it wrong and looking like a complete idiot.
That's just what we call all anime fans now. Weebs. A word completely invented by the Western imagination. I remember the R-Traps gay debate. This was an objectively terrible point in history. I remember watching Cowboy Bebop, finding Nujabes, finding Anime Vibe. You remember Anime Vibe? I remember Linkin Park AMVs. I believe Chester was my first celebrity death. I remember struggling to recommend JoJo to people back before it was cool, and then watching every episode of Part 5 each week as it aired, and talking about it with my friends. All of which, at this point, were my friends because we all drew and watched anime. I remember the first art friend I ever met forced me to morph my style into the anime style. I didn't really like that, but I adapted, hybridifying my more cartoony style with it. I remember back when that still mattered. Anime versus cartoons. I remember back when that mattered.
誰かが書いたものはもう自分が書く意味がないので、せっかくこの白い紙に何かを書くんだったら、まだ誰も書いたことがないものを書きたい。
I remember Naoki Urasawa's Manben. I remember this one video on YouTube where several mangaka drew their characters. I must have watched at least 12 times. I remember Fairy Tail being the first piece of media that I consciously recognized as being so bad that I felt that it insulted my intelligence. I remember getting so pissed off after an argument about it that in the middle of the damn day at school, in my Spanish notebook, I believe, I wrote my very first essay about a piece of media to explain why it sucks. This was 2018.
As I entered adolescence, I began seeking identity through the media I consumed, whether it was music, anime, manga, or films. Anime in particular played a big role in shaping both my personality and my sense of self. By December 2018, Fairy Tail was about to conclude. I binged the entire series in just 2 weeks, completely hooked. That's when I realized I had truly fallen in love with anime. I started joining anime communities on Discord, on Facebook, where I built lasting friendships, some of which carried into real life. Meeting those people after years always reminds me of the very first day I connected on a random anime Discord server. While some animes serve as mere starting points, but others fundamentally change how you view anime as a medium.
I remember growing out of shonen, though I still had maybe an intellectual respect for Dragon Ball. Also now able to see Naruto as being a flawed-ass show with generally garbaggio pacing. I made myself an enemy of the entire weeb circuit when it got leaked that I had the audacity to call Naruto trash, and that I thought Dragon Ball was more important than Attack on Titan, losing the respect of both demographics of the local weeb circuit and never quite getting it back. I wrote my second essay in defense of Dragon Ball, feeling so crestfallen when they refused to read it for my spelling and grammatical errors. I forced myself to become a better writer and essayist. I remember when I reached my peak of weebdom, watching my most formative series like Evangelion, NHK, and Lane. My most formative manga like Vagabond, Joe, and Punpun. I'd been drawing one-shots since I was 12, but that summer I'd commit to my first real 75-page project. I don't know exactly what changed. I remember afterwards, after that summer, after that peak, it all feeling less special. I knew intellectually that there was still more there. There was always going to be more anime, and anime is always going to be anime. But it all felt less new and wonderful. Until one day in 2019, in the high school Japan club, they were doing some Guess the Anime game I didn't play. I sat by the sidelines and watched. They were all so loud. Why were they so damn loud? Why do I actually not know a lot of these shows? Why do I not even care? I turned to my friend who was doing a Japanese lesson on her phone. I started saying something. I don't know if she heard me. I don't remember what it was myself. I silently felt myself grow uncomfortable in this space which was once a source of escape. Sounds once familiar grew eerie. These are my people. This is my tribe, isn't it? I've had to try really hard to find a tribe, and here they are, I suppose. On that Thursday afternoon, I realized I was no longer an anime fan.
Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist.
But that raises an interesting question. Why does language have rules? Why were we taught these rules in grade school?
Well, when you're taught rules of your own language in grade school, the chances are very strong that what you're being taught is false. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to be taught it. One of the things you learn in grade school is the literary language. Now, in English, the literary standard is not so radically different from what, say, you and I grew up with, but it's somewhat different. The literary standard is not what I learned in the streets. It's not very different, but it's a little different.
Languages are born when people need them. Whenever there are people, there will be language. Language can come in the form of paintings, those on cave walls, etchings in rock, stone, soon enough print, whatever is available to you. You need language to reach people, and you need people to survive.
Well, you have to understand somebody else's words. I mean, if you go to central London and somebody's speaking Cockney and the words happen to match ours at some abstract level, you still may not understand them.
Some created language through dance and music. Many cultures and species have found this more efficient. If you can't use your voice or hear, you use sign. Languages are in constant evolution. Languages emerge all the time. Languages become extinct. Languages become other languages. Words change meaning. Words get hybridized. Words get mixed with other words. Languages are always linked to cultures, and nothing can ever be fully translated in its completion. No message can, really. But you catch things to get a close enough essence to function.
The fact is that the system that grows in the brain is sometimes different from a system which is regarded, for whatever reason, as necessary or appropriate or approved or something.
You can identify people through their language and how they engage with those languages. Languages create groups. Languages create people. Languages bring people together and create walls between them.
心配になることないですか、スタジオの。
スタジオの将来ははっきりしてますよ。やっていけなくなります。ジブリなんて困ってさ、飛行機の名前で思いついてジブリとか言ったの。これ有名詞だからね。
Hello, my name is Russell, he, him, White from the United States of America, specifically Appalachia, which is important to my encounter with the funny Japanese cartoons that air at midnight. I suppose I technically got into anime via the normal routes, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, etc., but at that point in my life it wasn't anime, just other cartoons. I think it would have been in middle school when I started reading manga and watching whatever they put on Adult Swim. I thought of myself as a gamer at that point. Shout out to all the other losers here who were, like me, conned into watching G4. And anime sort of came with the territory. I had friends, but they generally abandoned me as I progressed a few grades, so I was sort of a habitual loner. Now, part of that was a class divide. My father was a first-generation graduate. My papa was a coal miner, and he held a pretty prominent government position in our area. My father, not my papa. We lived a distance away from town with no other neighbors our age, so it was just me, my brother, and my sister. The other half is that I was just a weird kid. So that was partially for the factors listed above, being separated from the rest of society, and partially just my natural temperament. So I couldn't fit in with the townies very well because I was never around them, but I couldn't fit in with the rural kids, so to speak, because I didn't go out on the four-wheeler or shoot deer. Now, this meant that I fit in with other kids as long as we liked the same things. Read market products here, and I was usually behind the curve.
Anime, in the sense that we use it, is a word that was invented by the West to describe a phenomenon, you could say a movement that was taking place in Japan, which was itself taken by Japan from the West to describe something that was happening over there. Anime famously is just a shortening of the English word animation. And that is just the word that Japanese people use to refer to what we call animation. When you see Japanese people referring to what we call anime in the sense that we use that word, they say Nihongo no anime, Japanese animation. Hell, even the Japanese word for Japanese is different from the word we use because it is in a different language. Different languages use different words to refer to themselves and the phenomena that exists. I mean, at this point, I'm just describing what a language is, but this is important.
Now, by 10th grade or so, I was alone and basically adopted by some weebs. They wouldn't call themselves weebs. They called other people weebs, but they had made friends with my older brother, and they introduced me to things like Evangelion, Akira, Madoka, and JoJo.
It is a kind of unique thing that the West has taken a word from a language to refer to a thing happening within it in a way just ever so slightly different from its original meaning, but different in such a key way. Japanese animation is just over 100 years old, but what we think of when we describe Japanese animation itself taken from American anime. Disney no anime. Bambi.
Walt Disney, the world's greatest storyteller, brings the world's greatest love story to the screen. Bambi.
Osamu Tezuka famously watched Bambi over 80 times. I'm gonna go into my former anime boomer mode. How many of you youngins even know who Osamu Tezuka is? The first generation of animators, they were fans of animation, literature, films, perhaps even life. Lots of them got their start. Hell, the manga industry boom was a direct result of this generation having seen war.
戦後の日本貧しい時期に日本人のエンターテインメントっていうものはやはりお金とか、人のいる映画はできなかったんだけれど、そういう時にそれに代わる夢とか希望とかっていうものを漫画で楽しむ。
なんかね、豆本ってね、本当に子供の手のひらぐらいのね、豆本ですよ。何かね、お菓子かなんかの、商品かなんかについてるんじゃないかな。おまけみたいなね。おまけみたいにね。
文化がだんだん若くなったんですよね。昔はもう少し年寄りの文化だったんですけどね。ちょうど文化が若くなりだした頃に漫画が流行りだしたんじゃないですかね。
It was the ones below them, the generation that watched Devilman and Lupin and Gundam, that went on to revolutionize the medium, for better or worse, in the 80s, creating most of the tropes that still exist today. Think Hayao Miyazaki to Hideaki Anno, Ashton Ojo to Hajime no Ippo. This was the era of Dragon Ball, the OVA boom, Urusei Yatsura, Akira, Bubblegum Crisis, Evangelion, City Hunter, Ghost in the Shell, Wicked City, Golden Boy, Rookies, Project Echo, Captain Tsubasa, Minky Momo, Kinnikuman. I am not an anime fan, I swear.
What the fuck?
For being son. BUNKA! It's the end for you.
There are some people I only met specifically because of a shared interest in anime. My online social life would look a lot different without anime. My in-person social life would look moderately different too. There are many cases where I watched anime together with a friend online and it became a bonding mechanism, and the flip side, you incur a social penalty among some people for liking anime. Perhaps there are some connections I would have made by not watching anime.
I have all this elite ball knowledge because when I was an anime fan, I was a neurodivergent anime fan, which is not unusual either, to be fair. When I started getting weary of the contemporary stuff that was airing in my time, the wealth of anime from years past began to speak to me. I think I've always just kind of been like that. I like old things. I like it when the time is gone and dead, so it can't be tampered with. It's a new world because it's far off and distant and gone, and I won't be disturbed there.
Wilbur?
My gosh, old times certainly are starting all over again.
Not a bit. There aren't any old times, but times are gone. They're not old, they're dead. There aren't any times but new times.
もうこれ20世紀の人間で21世紀にあんまり付き合いたくないんですよ。と思うけど21世紀の子供がいっぱいいるんだよなあそこに。
You start to see some very American things entering the country. Baseball, Christmas, television, jazz, hamburgers, business suits. This wave of new nouns would be alienating to the older generation that were used to the old nationalist and imperialist regime. But what is proven time and time again is that the younger generation is always going to be more accepting of the new.
確か20ぐらい違うんだもんね。
そうですね、高校ぐらいの時にモンスターだったんで。
あ、そうか、そのくらいか。
はい。
僕の模写が出てきたんですよ。で、ちょっと見ていただこうかなと。
あら、すごい。あら、私よりうまいよ。
But anime fandom and otaku culture really only emerged at this time, during the 80s and 90s. They draw from other anime, other manga, and the manga became inspired by the manga, and anime became more anime. This thing we invented began to exist because people really believed in it. It was so easy for them to. And it became all that they knew, and it became how they found each other. In spite of a hostile world that's always telling you what you are and aren't, demands of an inhuman society, and increasingly scary and, for some, boring world, these people were able to create something and find each other, and just like that, a culture was born.
I want to change the world.
At some point I had to accept that I am the type of person who has phases. No, it wasn't that random, I found out in therapy. I used to look down upon phase havers. I think I've always basically been the same person, but the Sonic phase gave way to the Disney phase, then the Disney phase gave way to the anime phase, which would then give way to my cinephile phase. There was a period between the anime phase and the cinephile phase where all I was watching was Lupin the Third Part 2 and Urusei Yatsura because they were old and they were long and they didn't really feel like the shows that at that point ceased to be interesting.
What in the hell does that mean?
I got into a few J-dramas. Shout out to Sukeban Deka, Aoi Hono. One of the ways people express their phases is through fashion.
From the tip of your toes to your head, you look like an unmade bed.
Clothing is interesting. I never used to care about clothes or fashion, but I've begun to think about it a lot. The clothes you wear, whatever it is, tells a story to the world about who you are, or at least how you'd like to be perceived.
You've either got or you haven't got style.
But it's all just fabric. All the meaning we've assigned to clothing is consumerist propaganda. Clothing isn't even necessary in all regions of the world. If you live in the tropics, you should not be wrapping yourself up in all these fabrics at all. That's colonialist brainwashing. Yet on clothes, we've assigned gender. We've assigned class status. A certain name will spike the price. A certain pattern tells the world something about you and you alone, whether you intend for it or not. Hairstyle is similar. In high school, we weren't allowed to have hair, us boys. They said if we had hair, we'd be distracted. That it was dirty. That it was just improper. Hair, apparently, says a lot and affects how you think.
But you're taught in the standard language not to do that. There's some other invented language, which is called the literary standard, in which you don't do it. And you ask the question, why do you have to teach people? Well, you have to teach them because it's artificial. It's not their language.
You can lose a job because of your hair. You can be sent out of a social establishment because of your clothes. Yet we've created these rituals around clothes. Rituals are practices created by people collectively to give value to things, to keep certain ideas alive, to keep certain peoples alive. Without rituals, without cultures, without these invented ideas, a people becomes aimless.
何者にも束縛されない自由の世界だよ。これが自由。そう、自由な世界。その代わりに何もない。
A people can even lose themselves. When certain rituals are erased entirely, a people can die. These norms, these messages, is any of it innate? Of course not. But we've birthed whole cultures through clothing.
a change from copying the West to something that can rival the West. Not just being Japanese, but transcending into something that is greater. As a 21st century man, it's really hard to comprehend the variety of films, literature, theater, and music that was made around that time. But it's important to understand that things just don't exist in a vacuum, including the Japanese animation industry, the animation industry, the counterculture revolution.
ある程度のものは書いてもらわないと困りますけど、正直言ってとにかく完成してほしい。
I only started to care about clothes when I went to university. I also had hair and began to experiment with it. None of it meant anything, yet it did. I began to experiment with the little tools in my wardrobe, playing around with certain aesthetics, certain narrative, which seeks to communicate something. And somehow, through those arbitrary pieces of fabric, those meaningless colonial strips that consumerism has assigned meaning, I began to find narratives that I could weave about myself. Some convenient narrative, something that comes close to telling the world who I am and what I represent. Soon enough learning to perform that role too. Acting in accordance and speaking in accordance. Most of the styles aren't weather appropriate and I can never wear almost ever.
But you see, the funnest part, one thing about like film geeks is they have an intense love for film. Incredible love for film, incredible passion. They devote a lot of time, they devote a lot of money, and they devote a lot of their life to the following of film. But they don't really have that much to show for all this devotion, other than a movie poster collection or a still collection. All right. The one thing that they do have to definitely show for is they have their opinion.
When I saw Pulp Fiction for the first time, I realized that movies existed. That they were always there, but I had never really watched them. There's an entirely new set of clothes that I had yet to wear, and I fell down the cinematic rabbit hole, watching all of Tarantino, then taking to his influences. Westerns, French New Wave films, gangster flicks, exploitation films, all these new images and new selves, the Kubricks and the Hitchcocks, the Scorseses and the Fellinis. I'd eventually find out women made films too.
Back in the day when Smosh used to be one of the most subscribed channels on YouTube, I found a video of Smosh's called Death Note in Real Life. And as a kid, I found that pretty cool and funny. The video was hilarious to me at that time. And I was like, okay, Death Note in Real Life. And then somehow in my YouTube recommendation, I got an episode of Death Note. Yeah. And I was like, what the hell? This thing is an actual show. It was amazing. It was an amazing first experience. I watched all of Death Note on YouTube, by the way. At the time, I didn't even know what anime was. I just watched it because I thought it was a cool show. I did not consider that, oh, it's anime.
Because I didn't have anyone to talk about these films, I'd make a Letterboxd account. When the Tarantinoisms became boring, I went for art house films. More worlds, more voices, more selves. Evangelion was probably what introduced me to art house. I'd seen Kanashimi no Belladonna, I'd seen Tenchi no Tamago, so now I found Shuji Terayama. Carefully curating my lists, my ratings, new coating, new characters, I'd begin to collect more evidence of my existence. Something closer. That's when I started going to the cinemas by myself to see films that no one else could possibly want to. And getting my feelings hurt when I attempted to show them those films.
You talk about Perfect Blue, I talk about Perfect.
How much of your performative job can leak into your regular life? And
when does it stop being a mask and just
it's something like various other pieces of fiction I've touched upon, like in American Psycho, there's Patrick Bateman is always in a performative state.
He literally goes, there is nothing underneath this mask.
これ俺書いたんか。あ、これね。こんなん見ちゃやられないね、これね。これは僕がものすごいスランプの時に書いたんです。スランプというか、もう、
Listening to esoteric old Italian music. No one can disturb me with my old Italian music. Whatever other niche genres and subgenres I could find. Of course, when I eventually stopped denying my love of hip-hop, everything I listened to was old and or off-kilter. Though I've been informed that that's the type that white people listen to.
Anime opened that gateway for me, and it was something that I really enjoyed. Basically, I'm learning to become an animator because I watched a couple of anime back when I was 12 and decided, yes, this is exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. And with every anime that I watched, every movie, every art piece that I consumed, my passion just grew.
昔のこういう絵に馴染んでる人は、手塚がもうダメになったって言われるんだけど、だから今何よりもとにかく一番悩んでることっていうと絵でしょうな。本当に描けない僕は絵が。もう描いてて苦しくない。
My phases last about 3 years. I've realized I was into anime in the years that you might call middle school, 12 to 14. My cinephile phase lasted when I was about 15 to 18, 19-ish. At that point, I had begun to get more into television and soon novels, but that was the age I started going to university to study film. I've been sort of imprisoned to the cinema since. It was also the age when I started doing YouTube. YouTube recently told me I've been doing this for 3 years.
So, in a way, Perfect Blue, what it does is, you get to see this pop idol who wants to be an actress now, living through, and now she's super paranoid because she thinks everyone is still watching her.
Yeah.
She's always being watched.
Yeah. And she starts to almost not tell the difference between when is she acting, when is she on camera, when is she in front of a mirror, and when is she looking at herself, or when is she having almost split personality moments.
When you have different phases, you aren't changing yourself. You are uncovering different parts of yourself. Different, often contradictory parts, but each of them is perhaps equally you. The clothing in your wardrobe gives you a certain handful of tools to use, and none of it really matters, but you're attempting through performance to gather more and more pieces of yourself. I don't know if that self can be found in a store, or caught on camera, or framed on a wall, stacked on a shelf. But here we are.
いや、自分一人一人が幸せになることが目的だっていう。自分が幸せになることがどうも俺納得できないんですよ。
I still go to anime conventions whenever I can, because my friends go there. My friends sell out these conventions because they're the only places you really can. My friends all know each other. My room is full of little anime trinkets and merchandise, even though almost all of these shows I haven't seen in years. There exist spaces for those who don't go to the dance hall, who were also always bored in church. Maybe they go to the dance hall, maybe they go to church, maybe they go to carnival, but there exists a space where they can express a version of themselves that is denied everywhere else. Versions of themselves that are not acknowledged by the world that they live in. Images that only speak to them, and they can only express themselves. Music that only they can hear. Languages that only they recognize. And my friends all know each other. I still go to anime conventions whenever I can.
普段幸せだななんて思ったことないんですよ僕は。だって映画やったら不幸になるに決まってんだ。それなのにもう次のやつを描きたいなと思ってんだからどうしていいか。
The last time I went to one of these this summer, a taxi picked me up. I'd been going to this particular con since I was 14, and they were a tiny little group that met in a park back then. They've gradually been getting bigger and bigger over the years, and this year they had a con at the National Arena. Good grief, what happened? At that time, I had one manga volume that I cherished that my father bought from abroad. Now they sell manga in bookstores. No one used to know what anime was. Now the new Demon Slayer is showing in theaters, and the Chainsaw Man movie is coming soon. 7 years is a long time, I guess. I got in the taxi.
It's simply... I cannot state just how much this has impacted me. It's impacted me mind for...
After I left my bleep phase, I genuinely could not watch anime. I just didn't care for it. Besides Lupin, or Odyssey Yatsura. And I basically shunned it entirely for about a year or two. Then when COVID hit and I had more time, I decided something. I was not going to view anime as anime. These are just shows. These are animated shows from Japan. I have more time now and I need to watch more shows. So I watched my first prestige TV show, The Sopranos, and paired it up with Cardcaptor Sakura. For about a month, I think, every Monday morning, I'd watch an episode of Gabagool and 2 of Cardcaptor Sakura. Why is it that when I decided to not view anime as anime, the first thing I did was finally get into shoujo? I don't know. But I also watched Sailor Moon, His and Her Circumstances, Princess Tutu, Takahashi's Akage no An. I would have gotten into this eventually, but Revolutionary Girl Utena, one of the greatest shows of all time, I think. Something about dropping the baggage of the anime label liberated my mind or something. I was no longer an anime fan, I was a media connoisseur. And I went out and watched everything again. Every show, every film. I never did fall off of manga in the same way, but I also get into Crumb, and Scott Pilgrim, and Batman, and Archie, and Tintin, and more recently, Peanuts. I've begun to really enjoy Peanuts. When I abandoned the burden of labels, media became fun again. I became a connoisseur of a little bit of a lot of things.
I 12月になるとヤギ出すんですよね。でヤギ覚えてるんですよ。ねえねえいないねっていうのが通ってるから。
It's just that I got some bad ideas in my head. It takes a job, you know? And that job, you know, that becomes what he is. You know, you do a thing and that's what you want. One guy lives in Brooklyn, one guy lives in Sutton Place, you get a lawyer, another guy's a doctor, another guy dies, another guy gets well, and, you know, people are born. I envy your youth. Go on, get laid. Get drunk, you know. That's about the dumbest thing I ever heard.
If you're blessed in this world to find people you connect with you hold on to them. People find themselves and each other in different ways, and we need people. Anything that gets in your way of finding people is a plot of evil. And anything that brings you closer to people is a joy that you should hold on to. And anything that brings you closer to people is a joy that you should hold on to. Find your people however you can.
Yeah, それで無限の可能性を持っている子供が生まれてくるんだけど、その可能性を次々と諦めていくことなんですよ。
And getting picked up from an anime convention, I guess that makes me an anime fan.
何かを選ぶってことは他のことで諦めることにつながるから、結局そうなるんです。これはもうしょうがないですよ。人間の存在そのものはそういうもんなんだから。